All right, we are back. Laughable moment for the show. Secrets are good, though. But anyway, we are back with good vibes. Martin False with Debbie Cox de Nova. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Doing okay?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. But it's the new year.
Yes.
People always come and they bring you this list.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my 10 goals this year. I'm going to do all 10. They start off like gangbusters.
Yeah.
They go home, they on a diet, they're doing really well. But week 3 or 4, why eating that Whopper? Well, I got tired, you know. So I guess today's topic, following through on goals, it's hard to do it.
It is. It's so hard. I talk to people all the time as a transformation coach. They come, they're frustrated because they don't need to know what to do. They know the steps. In fact, they've often exposed themselves to so much information. They feel like they could write a book on it. And yet, in life, they're having a hard time actually taking the steps to making the goal. So we're going to talk about how to hack the brain and why this is such a universal problem. You're not alone if you're experiencing this. And hopefully this conversation will make a difference in 2024 for you so that you actually make your goals and stand the long haul. And there is actual benefits to your brain by doing this. Okay, so there is a part of the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Let's just call it the AMCC. It's not talked about a lot. In fact, a lot of neuroscientists don't even know about this brain. There's some emerging science around it, and it's kind of exciting. It's on both sides of the brain, and what the AMCC is responsible for is sensing that there's a challenge and sort of gearing up to meet that challenge. Okay, so when they stimulated that part of the brain, the person would actually sense that there was a challenge and gear up, okay? So this is our motivation, if you will. Now, what we know is that over time with the aging process, we lose brain mass. And a big part of the brain mass that we're losing is in the AMCC. And emerging research is showing that this is not only responsible for meeting temporary challenges, but even possibly the will to live. So if you can, on a regular basis, train the AMCC, what you can find is that people who, for example, resist temptation, so they have a temptation to do something and they know it's not good for them, and they resist it, what we see over time, consistently doing that actually increases the size of the AMCC. For those people, for example, who go through yo-yo dieting, it's the opposite is true. If you have temptation and you fail to that temptation, over time, what happens is a downward trajectory of the activity and the size of your AMCC. So if you're able to take this conversation, what we're having today, and apply it to your life on a consistent basis, not only will you reach and achieve your goals, but you'll also preserve your brain in a way that, it's like superagers. Superagers is kind of a misnomer, but superagers are those who maintain their cognitive function. So maintain the same cognitive function that they had in their 20s and 30s into their 70s, 80s, 90s.
Does that come from consistency, or does your brain know when you're trying to punk it?
Well, that's a good point. So if you are doing something, for example, I love exercise, right? Not everybody does, but I'll actually go out.
You're an exercise freak.
I'm an exercise freak. I've created a positive association to exercise, which everybody can do, by the way, but I have done that. And so I will actually go for the enjoyment of it out to the lake, maybe at midnight, and I'll do sprints. Okay, so for me, when I'm doing sprints, and even when I'm going really, really hard, because I enjoy it, that actually is not increasing the size of my AMCC. It has to be what Dr. Andrew Huberman calls either micro sucks or macro sucks. So you're going just on the outside of your sort of parameters of what you actually want to do or that you enjoy doing. So if it's, for example, the dirty dishes that are piling up and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, right? If you will actually take the step to do that, you'll actually be increasing the size of your AMCC.
So if it sucks, it's good for the brain.
Yes. It is.
Wow.
So this is important for us to note before we go into the completion of goals, is that it's not just about you accomplishing your goals. This is something that actually trains that part of your brain so that over time you actually have more ability to do things that you don't feel like doing that result in the results that you want. Now, what you need to know about the brain is that, first of all, it acclimatizes very quickly to stimulus, okay? So that's why, for example, if you first put on a watch, it's cold to the touch. But then after a while, you kind of get desensitized to it, and you don't even notice that you're wearing a watch. Same thing with a shirt. You're right, when you put it on, you can feel it. If you walk into a stinky bathroom, at first you're like, oh, that's foul, but your body and your mind acclimatizes to it. Okay, so it gets used to stimulus, and it also gets bored. It gets curious about something else really easily, so it wants to move on to deeper stimulus. So what happens whenever you are not doing the activities that you want to do is really a problem of your brain getting bored with what it is so let's just say you start studying and then you're like, oh, the follow through isn't there because you're just like, I don't want to do this. What's really at play there is that your mind wants to do something else. Even if the mind just wants to sit on the couch, that starts to look like a better option, right? So it's getting bored. And so we can take a note from addiction psychiatry and use this evidence-based science called urge surfing. What we know is that urges and other emotions, they move, they dissipate. And so if you can withstand the urge, like in other words, don't follow through on the urge to stop and go watch TV, but just feel it, like actually surf on top of it. What you'll notice is that it comes up and then your mind becomes bored of the urge and you can go back to what you're doing. So if you're on a plane and you have an urge for a slice of pizza, but no pizza is to be found, you're not going to spend the rest of that flight like going pizza, 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 likely, okay? Your brain's going to get bored of the craving, and then it's going to divert to something else. And so that's what we're talking about. It's called urge surfing. Addicts use it for all sorts of things. And you're just feeling that emotion, riding the wave, and coming off of it and going back to what you're doing.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Absolutely.
All right, hold that thought. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back right after this. Don't go away. More good vibes. Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality. Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights. All right, we are back with Debbie Cox, the Nova Transformation Coach, right here on Good Vibes, and we're talking about following through on goals. All right, couples watching. What happens if one of them's always tempted to cheat? They're sitting in a ballroom, the man sees a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Can he surf past it?
Yes, he can.
All
so
right.
This is a really important thing because especially when we're talking about strong urges. And so when we're talking about infidelity, what often we're talking about when you talk to people, and I do a lot, who actually fall prey to infidelity and oftentimes wreck their entire lives because in that moment there's an urge that they follow through on. It's important to recognize that an urge is not going to stay consistently the way it is. The mind will develop a tolerance, it'll get bored, and it'll want to move on to something else. And so if you're able to sit with the feelings, and it's a lot of what we often talk about with everything else, like instead of avoiding the feeling that is coming up within you, be with it. Even if it's uncomfortable.
Embrace it.
Embrace it. So embracing it doesn't mean to allow it to drive your life, right? To drive your activity. But what you want to do is just notice it. Okay, I'm having an urge right now to go over and talk to a beautiful woman. My commitment is to my wife, my family. And so I'm just going to feel this feeling. And I'm going to allow it to pass. And it'll be like a wave. You're riding up on top, and it'll reach a peak where you really want to go. And then after a while, it'll calm down, and then you'll have more ability to respond instead of react. So yes, you can use it on any urge. You just recognize that the mind does get bored. It normalizes. It builds a tolerance, and then it goes, okay, what's next, right?
Similar to if he would act on it, he would probably get bored with her down the line anyway.
For sure. And that definitely happens as well. And so that's when all the enchantment goes away and it's like, oh gosh, what have I done? Right. So it's
I've wrecked
important.
my marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
It's important to recognize that we all have minds that operate in this way. Right. So they're curious, they get bored. And so if you're, for example, writing a business plan and you're just like, okay, I don't feel like doing this, right? You're going to go raid the fridge, sit for a second and go, okay, what I want to do right now. And I want you to notice what the mind says. Always notice what your mind is telling you. Oh, this is boring. We could do this tomorrow. I'm tired today. You know, your mind will tell you all sorts of things. Even maybe for some of you, this may be such a confronting conversation that you want to switch off right now. Notice that. Notice your mind saying, let's watch this later. I'll save it and watch it later. Because that's a trick to actually keep you from doing the thing that you're committed to. Now, what's also important to note is that, and this information comes from Heidi Priebe, is that you have to be able to distinguish between actually a real goal and a fantasy that you're using to escape the uncomfortable present moment. So a lot of people will say, oh, I'm going to do this thing out there. But then when you start to see their actions are not aligning to it, but they talk about it a lot, it's because they are using that fantasy of a future to escape from the present reality. And you want to know that the signs of when you're doing that, because if you don't, you'll end up in deep regret. Starting to evaluate and go, oh my gosh, like I've been talking about this for a long time and it hasn't happened. And so really there are three things that I want to say, three signs, okay? So the first one is that you're constantly in the ideation phase and you're not actually taking the action steps. You're actually rarely ever executing on it, okay? So you're thinking about the top of the mountain and you're not actually executing. What that requires is that you come into the present moment. So if you're thinking about the top of the mountain all the time, it's going to be so great up there, but you're not looking at the present moment. It's like not knowing where you are on the map. Like you are here, right? You need to know you are here to know whether or not you're at the base of the mountain. You have to walk a trail to get to the mountain first, right? The second thing is that you find yourself picturing the highlight reel and not the problems associated with the new life or the new goal, because there are always problems associated, new problems, different problems. So what you're doing as a human being is you're trading one set of problems for a set of problems that you prefer better. You want to be a best-selling author? Can you sit with the problem of that you're going to write out a whole chapter and realize this isn't flowing right now? I have to go back over and over again, reread it, make edits over and over again, because that's a new kind of problem. Would you prefer that problem to the problem that you're having right now? Because that's what you need to know.
Embrace the suck, right?
Embrace the suck, exactly.
Yeah.
And recognize that as human beings, we're not going to escape pain. We're not going to escape discomfort. And so a lot of times whenever you're thinking about that future version of yourself, you're picturing this idealized kind of version. And then that's the other thing is that number 3, you want to recognize that whenever someone starts to talk to you about the plans that are associated with your goal, if you find yourself getting defensive, that's a sign that you may be in a fantasy versus actually working toward a new goal.
And don't we always know people in our groups that have fantasized for you? We always hear about the new plan, and we all look at each other and go,
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Yeah. And if you ask them about it, if you go, well, so exactly what are you doing you'll find defensiveness. If I'm actually on the path to doing something and someone asks me questions about it, I'm eager to say, and if they're giving me feedback, I'm eager to apply that feedback. But if I'm engaged in a fantasy, it's like watching Heidi Priebe says it's like watching Pirates of the Caribbean, somebody sitting there going, that can never happen. And you're like, shut up. I'm watching Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't want to know about reality.
It's fantasy.
Right. So it's kind of like that whenever someone talks to you about your goals and they're asking challenging questions, if you find yourself defensive, it's because they're poking holes in your fantasy. And you need to recognize that it's time to take your focus from the far future into the next 24 to 72 hours where you have the ability to take action to actually change your life. Because people who are actually reaching their goals, that's the distinction, is that they're actually within the next 24 hours taking real action steps toward their goals versus just fantasizing and using that as a way to escape the present moment. And the reality is, the more that you stay in the present moment, at the end of the day, the journey is what counts, and you'll have more memories and more fulfillment than if you're escaping all the time to an idealized future.
Yeah, and I never get too adopted to goals. I tell you that before because I love to be spontaneous. Road bumps are not my friend. Just do it.
Right, exactly.
Like Nike used to say, just
stay
do
in
it.
action.
Thank you, Deborah. Great topic.
Of course.
Happy New Year's, everyone. We'll see you again next week.